Welcome everybody to Getting APIs to Work and What Would the Web Do? The segment with Mike Amundsen. Hey Mike, how are you doing?
All right, how you doing, Eric?
Doing well, thank you. This is the segment where we explore what would the web do? And as usual, we have a specific topic, and today our topic is platforms. So I think we all know very well what the web platform is. At least I think it's a word that I've heard for a very long time. So if you had to explain to somebody what the web platform is, how would you explain what that is, Mike?
I don't really know. So the web platform is actually the agreement between every party, right? It's the conventions, it's the standards. That's the entire platform, right?
Yes, that's the point to me, right? That the platform is not a thing, so to speak. It's not a specific infrastructure, a specific environment that you build on. It's like you say, right? It's a set of agreements that you build on where you say, if we all do things this way, we get to use and we get to be part of the web.
Right, and the we all do things this way part is really just the interface. We all agree to the same interface. The actual way we do it is entirely unregulated, right? The agreement, the platform, is how we exchange and what rules we use to exchange information back and forth, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I think so. And if we go back 30 years to the very beginnings of the web, what looked that very first agreement like? What was in it?
Right. So, I mean, the one that I know is Tim Berners-Lee. I would say starts with the World Wide Web. His invention of HTTP and HTML with he and his team. That's sort of the first web that I know, right? Is there anything before that? 0.09 HTTP is what I have in my head.
No, absolutely. I think that is the first thing that came into existence. And part of the genius there, I think, was already this version, and we talked about this last time, right? This version, we talked about versioning, had this very nice model of how you can extend or improve on the language, right? It already had this model of HTML looks like this right now, and this is how it works, but be prepared that it might change, and then this is how you have to use it. So I think the fact that the platform had this built-in evolvability from the very beginning, I think this is so critical for how the web was able to succeed, because it fueled the growth, right?
Yeah, and I think that what impresses me so much when you look at Tim Berners-Lee, I think he's got some of his personal pages, from that era, 89, 90, 91. What he describes as the protocol, as the HTTP protocol, the application level protocol, is very straightforward. It's completed in, I think, less than 5 or 6 pages, and has lots of open ends, just like you said, like this will change, this can grow. But he has a coherent protocol in a very short amount of text, and never gets involved in how that protocol will be implemented using what programming languages or any of this kind of stuff. Doesn't exist. And I think that sets a really, really important critical element to the way the platform for the web works. And that is this separation, right, between what the agreement is and how the agreement will be implemented.
Yes, absolutely. And like you say, right, if you would imagine the web would have started by saying everybody can participate, but it has to be implemented in, I don't even know what it was implemented in first version, like in Fortran, right? You can only have running in Fortran. I think that may have had quite a bit of impact. I don't even know. Do you know what language the first web server was?
He built it on that Next machine, right? On the Apple Next machine. So I'm figuring it was in C, right? Some variation of C.
Objective-C, right? Wasn't that
Objective-C, right? Yeah. And again, this is a brand new machine. I think we've all seen the photograph of, the original next box that was the World Wide Web. This is the World Wide Web. Don't turn this off. This is like the sticker on it, and it would have been so easy, since this is the very first one, to say you're going to build it in Objective-C and you're going to use these routines and do these things. But he didn't do that, which I find so prescient. Whether he didn't do it because he was thinking ahead or because he didn't have the time, I don't really know. I don't know that deep the story. But it, like you say, it sets the tone, doesn't it? That the agreement is this protocol, these methods, the message itself, the headers, the command line, the body. That's the agreement. That's the platform right there. And he invented both the protocol, HTTP, and he had to come up with a markup language, HTML, at the same time. He had to invent both the servery part and the clienty part at the same time, which I thought was pretty good too.
Now, when we look at these early things that were necessary, HTTP and HTML, by now, when you look at what the web platform looks like, what would you list as the current foundation, so to speak, or building blocks of the web platform as we have it today, 30 years later?
Well, okay, so this is the way I think about it. I'll be curious to see how you think about it too. I think about the web as a sort of a loose confederation of some separate elements. So the markup of the message, HTML, the styling of the message, CSS, and the animation of the message with JavaScript. All of those are separate documents that come together over this protocol of HTTP. That's what I think of as the web. And it isn't really the API web that I spend most of my time in. Like, I think of the API web as kind of a modification of that original World Wide Web idea. But that's kind of the way I think about it. So you have these loosely separated concerns. You have this document format that everyone depends on. That means you can build a client application that just needs to know those things. It needs to know HTTP, it needs to know HTML, it needs to know JavaScript, it needs to know CSS, and nothing more. And I think that's a pretty brilliant set of building blocks. They're all relatively abstract. CSS is an annoyingly abstract model, but it's super, super powerful, right? So that's what I think of. I mean, does that come close to what you think about? I mean, from your perspective.
Even though I think sometimes, what many people I think are not quite aware of nowadays is the complexity of the browser as a runtime platform, right? Because it needs to run JavaScript, which is true, but the magic is not so much that it runs JavaScript, but that it has this rich runtime environment where you can make the browser do so many things, right? And there are all these HTML5 APIs, and by now I think it's well over about 100 standards or something like this, basically, that define individual browser APIs where your scripting code can do stuff with the browser. And I think that is where, like, a lot of the complexity of today's web platform lies, is in web-based applications, not so much in like the good old document web, but more in the runtime environment of the browser.
Now that's a really good point. So sort of the web-based applications, the browser is a platform. We've gone through lots of attempts and iterations on this too. There have been some rather specific implementations of applications over the web using the browser as a platform, right? Like, we can think of applets, right, from Java, right? There used to be these Java applets that were applications that ran, right? Or
like a blast from the past. I'm wondering how many of our viewers even know applets.
Well, okay then. How about ActiveX from Microsoft, right? That was another platform.
Newer than applets, yes.
So yeah, they're newer, right? So what are some of the more recent ones? What are the ones that maybe some of our viewers know?
By far the most successful one that I would say existed for a long time and still exists is Flash, right? So Flash, I think Flash had the advantage that it was a little bit more lightweight than the applet model, and that it was not quite as platform dependent compared to ActiveX.
Right.
And for a little while, it was Silverlight, right? Like
Silverlight, exactly.
Microsoft's attempt to squash Flash.
Yep. But all of those to me, so we list these, right? But all of those to me didn't seem to follow that web ethos we were just talking about, right? They weren't separate concerns. They didn't combine to use things. It almost as if they used HTTP in the browser as merely containers or transport elements. So these locked up things inside, whatever was in the applet or the ActiveX or whatever, operated independently, right? It was like sort of squeezing toothpaste through a tube sort of approach. I was never really a fan of those. And I wonder what you think about that. I mean, those seem to be anti-web things to me. I don't know if you think about it that way or not.
I am kind of a little bit conflicted. So with Flash, right? So I was like, I think nobody ever really loved Flash. At least nobody loved the web. But there was always, to me, at least when Flash was around and when browsers weren't as capable as they are today, I think there were legitimate users of Flash. So for example, for media playback, right, there just was no other way of doing it. So if you wanted to stream video in your browser, basically Flash was the way to go. It was either this or you don't have video, right?
Yep.
But then the question was like, do I just use this little Flash playback window and then the rest is proper webby stuff? Or, which many websites then did, right? Do I build my whole page and my whole site in Flash? And anybody who doesn't use Flash just doesn't see anything, right? It's just this little symbol, the little F. You remember the F?
Yeah.
Not for you.
Not for you. Too bad.
Too bad, yeah.
I think one of the things this points out is sort of anti-webby, I think that this all is we've just listed a whole bunch of technologies that have come to life and faded away. And it hasn't broken the web, right? The web is still here. The browser is still here. So that, again, to me, really speaks to the platform resilience of what we know of as the web. So you could invent this wholly contained thing like an applet or an ActiveX or a Flash or a Silverlight, and it can have its whole life cycle. And the web just keeps on chugging along right away. That they're separate in that sense, and that separation gives it some real power. The platform for the web seems to be very resilient, right?
That is a really nice way of looking at it, I think. You're saying that the web is so well built that it even survived Flash.
Yeah, you could do that. We're going to get some letters from Adobe for sure on this whole
To be a little bit inviting some comments, do you think the web will survive JavaScript? Will there be a time where we still have the web, but we will look at JavaScript in the same way as we look at Flash now and say, you know those days when people wrote JavaScript apps?
Right.
Will we? Is that a future that we will? That is.
I guess it's possible. It's possible, right? So one of the things that's going on, and we've talked about it briefly in this series, is this sort of low code, no code kind of revitalization that's going on, right? Getting things done without writing a lot of code. One of the things I've always thought of JavaScript as kind of a patch for the markup not being able to do certain things, right? I can't get good type ahead suggestion lists, that fill in my box. So I write script for it. So I think one of the things that happened in the last several years is we introduced this notion of componentizing markup in a way that you could create your own control, create your own markup control, angle bracketed sort of HTML custom control. So yeah, I think it might be. We might be able to close the gap in experience to the point where you can use markup to get a lot of the things that we have to use JavaScript in order to experience today. I certainly think that's possible. I don't know how probable it is because people like JavaScript so much, right? But I would love to see less JavaScript and more markup in my client applications. More declarative, less imperative. That's what I
more
like.
declarative. Typically, also it's more secure, right? You can it's more performant. So it has a lot of advantages. The disadvantage, I think, is that it's just having a general purpose programming language will always allow you to do stuff that the declarative things just can't quite cover, right? So,
yep.
So as you said, I think as a patch, it's probably useful. But then again, when you look at, sometimes when I really don't follow CSS that much anymore, but sometimes when I just run across some CSS demo of what the latest and greatest versions of CSS can do with zero scripting, it's unbelievable. They have almost now they have like kind of these physics simulations where you see like things bouncing between things and a shadow, and it's I don't know, it's pretty amazing.
You're right. CSS is a whole nother area. I love the CSS origin stories. Hockham William Lee, I think, is one of the primary designers of CSS, and he's written some great books on it. I just saw, I think it was just within the last day or two, an article that demoed a random password generator completely in CSS.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing the kinds of things you can do. But let's focus a little bit on our API topic, right? So far, I think we have looked a lot at the web history, and I think it's really interesting to look at what a platform maybe in the ideal sense should be. Because as you said, right, it's pretty amazing to see that how far the web platform has come, and that it's still the web platform basically that it started as, and how it was able to grow and kind of outgrow certain things and so forth. What can we learn for the API space? Like, are there certain lessons in there where you think these are things we maybe right now are not quite as good at, and where looking at the web for inspiration might help us?
So the one that I'll come back to from our original conversation is the original web specified how we would interact, specified the interface, and none of the implementation details. Did a fantastic job of separating what from how. And I think when I look at the way we talk about APIs, most of the specification I see on APIs has an awful lot to do with how. It's an API framework, it's an API platform, it's an API style guide, all these other things. They have an awful lot to do with how. I'd love to see our APIs focus on the exchange, the interface level alone, and not regulate what language you use, what platform you use, what library you use, what database you use, none of those other things. So I would really like us to see us focusing on the interface and stopping there.
And really designing good interfaces. Yeah, that I think is important. The thing that I think we also should be better at is this idea we also, I think, already mentioned, that it really shouldn't matter where stuff is available, right? On the web, it doesn't matter whether something runs on my little computer here or whether I have it runs in some cloud. It also doesn't matter if I move it from my computer to the cloud, because at some point I need some better scalability, so that's what I do. That really shouldn't matter for anybody consuming my service. And I think that is where we still have often in the architectures that we build and in the way that we build our platforms, we have way too much coupling between where we make stuff available and what our models of findability, usability, consumption, all these things look like, right? And then when we want to change, or when we want to make several things available together, suddenly things don't work as well anymore because, this is running in Amazon and this is running in Azure, and what now? And you're wondering, it's like, well, what does that even matter?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So not just the what and the how, but the where, right? I mean, we have DNS for a reason. That was one of the things that Tim Berners-Lee, when he tells the story, he says, I could hook DNS into these other technologies, and then that's how the web really happened. So one of the things that impresses me about the way the web operates is how, what Alan Kay says, extreme late binding. Like, we don't really know where this server is today. We won't actually know until we actually do the resolution at runtime to see what actual IP it is and what machine it points to, right? And we don't care. So it's extremely late binding. It's binding at runtime. So I think we need to do lots more of that, which is, I think, really your point, right? Like, I don't care if it's in Azure today or if it's in Amazon tomorrow or if it's in Google the day after that. I don't care if it's close or near or far, the web works. So I think that's another thing that we need to get better at, which is this extreme late binding. We could do a whole episode on that as well. This notion of discovery and late binding and stuff like that.
That's for sure. Yeah, naming and identity, right? This stuff. Isn't that like there's this saying that there's only two hard problems in computer science? What is it, naming and caching or something?
I think it's something like that. Yeah, there's only two problems, hard problems: naming, caching, and the one-off problem.
Okay. Good one. Yeah. Okay, so I think we still have something that we can learn from the web in the API space when we look at platforms. I think that's our takeaway here, where we say, if we look at the web and how it was able, and I'm still fascinated, certainly it's out of my reach, but I would like to hold up my web book again, right? The one that I wrote.
Yeah.
Almost, now it's 25 years ago, right?
So the World Wide Web, the one with XML, that's 25 years?
Yeah, I wrote it in 96 or maybe 97. So, but it's close. And I mean, to me, the fascinating part is that most of it in there is still accurate. I mean, of course, there's a lot of stuff missing. But there's very little in there that's not accurate anymore, which to me is just fascinating, right? It's like you can still read it and you would understand parts of the web. Well, you would like other parts, but and that's the lesson there, I think, where when we are talking about platforms and API platforms in organizations, and you're wondering, well, for how long am I planning those, right? And it's I think it's one of the things that Roy Fielding always said, right? It's like this design style is meant on for a size, or what do you say, of decades, right? The time. And I think that is an important thing to keep in mind, right? Don't optimize and think about, what am I going to do next quarter? But really, like, how am I designing and building something that will be a stable but still flexible foundation for years and years to come?
Exactly.
And that's not easy, but we have something to look at, so that's good.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we've covered another good topic that we have, platforms. It's always a good topic. Thanks so much for joining, Mike. Typical, my usual question, what's the next topic?
I don't want to commit. We'll come up with something brilliant.
Okay, I like that. We'll come up with something good. We still have a good stash of ideas to pick from. So if you like this one, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments, please leave a note. We'd love to hear from you. For today, thanks a lot for listening. Thanks, Mike, for joining in. And see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.